Good evening, everybody. We're going to call to order the Tuesday, July 16th meeting of the Corte Madera Town Council. Can we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Casissa.
Here.
Councilmember Lee.
Present.
Councilmember Thomas. Here. Vice Mayor Ravazio. Here. Mayor Beckman.
Here. Please join me in the salute to the flag.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everybody. Now we'll have open time for public comment. This is an opportunity for members of the public to comment on any items that are not on tonight's agenda. And members of the public will be given 3 minutes apiece. If you're here with us in person and would like to comment on an item not on our agenda, please go ahead and come up to the podium here. If you are on Zoom and would like to make a comment on an item that's not on our agenda, please raise your hand and we will bring you online to speak. I'm not seeing any members of the public here in present who would like to speak. Do we have any hands up on Zoom?
We do not have any hands raised on Zoom, and we didn't receive emailed public comment for open time.
Okay, thank you very much. Then I will close open time and move us on to tonight's presentations. We have a presentation from Age Friendly Corte Madera on the results of their recent survey of older adults, and I'll turn it over to Patty.
Thank you. Okay, I'm Patty Stolier of Age Friendly Corte Madera. I'm accompanied here tonight by our survey consultant, Sarah Robinson of Waypoint Strategies. She was also a member of the Commission on Aging and worked on aging for the County of Marin and volunteers with San Anselmo Age Friendly. It has been 10 years since we sent out the first survey, and it was an important information gathering process because not only did we use it for planning in Corte Madera, but it had far-reaching effects. And it impacted the county, and ultimately Rachel Guinness used data that was in it to create her ADU legislation that was brought to the state of California. So you see that our tiny little data points in Corte Madera went a long way. I shared the 5-year action plan on October 21st, and since then, Age Friendly has continued to dedicate itself to the original goals. You are aware that Age Friendly received an extremely generous bequest, and we're now considering the best uses that might help the most people in our community. We were also recently contacted by Rotary Club of Marin Sunrise, located for many of its 37 years in Corte Madera, with another generous donation to use for a revitalized intergenerational center. Okay, first slide. So most of you are familiar with what we do. Here are some of the highlights. You might not know about Cycling Without Age. This is Cheryl Longinati's baby. It's a trishaw that she uses to take people on free rides through the town, including some of the people that are living at Casa Madera, some of the people that are in Larkspur, and also at Christmas time, she takes people to see the Christmas lights. She is also involved with the Walking Map Project, and the Walking Map Project is going to include benches, restrooms, drinking fountains throughout Corte Madera and Larkspur. Next slide. So here are some of the many expressions of appreciation for our town. It was just wonderful to see how much people love living in Corte Madera, and it was expressed over and over again. I'm going to come out feet first when I die. So I think people are here for the duration. Younger and more active residents wrote that it made them think about the future more. Residents took time to share their good ideas as well as some concerns. And Nearly 100% of the people said that they want to continue to live in Corte Madera. 97% said it was very important or somewhat important to live the rest of their lives in Corte Madera, and the same wanted to age in their homes. Next slide. We mailed surveys to 2,761 residents that were 60 years and older. We had an impressive 31% return rate of 806 responses. So our survey is statistically representative of the full population of 60 plus residents. To note a few data points, you might be aware that Marin is the fastest aging county in California. From 2000 to 2022, we saw an increase of 39% in the number of residents over 60. You'll note that the portion of the population 0 to 19 was declining during these years. Marin expects an additional 30% increase in this demographic in the next 10 years, based on the California Department of Finance. And we're living longer too. We saw a nearly 4-time increase, 375%, in people living 85 years or longer. Next slide. So connection and communication is something that came up over and over again. We know that eating alone has very negative effects on our health and well-being. I pointed out previously that the research shows that isolation's effects on someone's health is similar to smoking a half pack a day. We know frequent social connection leads to improved health and cognitive function and increased longevity. Combating social isolation was the main reason that we established the Age-Friendly Intergenerational Center in 2018. Participating in social activities can become more difficult as people age due to accessibility or transportation challenges, financial constraints, or health issues. And speaking of financial constraints, I come bearing thank yous from the aqua fitness people at Redwood this morning, saying, please tell the town how grateful we are that they're providing these free swimming lessons. So I promised I would do that. And thank you to Pat for seeing that that came about. It really, and Adam, matters to me because on the 2 months that I'm not paying anything, the rest of the year, I'm paying $100 a month to go to Strawberry and do the same 2 classes. So much appreciated. We might also consider how can we enhance town communications so that the word gets around. 9% of the town doesn't use the internet, and so it's essential. We're very lucky to have the reader board. A lot of towns don't have anything like that. Less than half of all age groups receive the Corte Madera Chronicles. So we need to brainstorm how to get more subscribers because it answers so many questions, especially those that you see over and over on Nextdoor. Like, what are they doing on the corner of so-and-so and so-and-so? So if people would read the Chronicles, they'd know. Next slide. Okay, so housing, since it was so important for people to age in place, we really need to focus a lot of attention on that. 53% need modifications in order to stay in their home. So that's more than half of the people. I'm so impressed with Sausalito's initiative to omit the permit fees for aging modifications. That was just brilliant. 1/3 are unsure if they can afford to stay in their homes. Kudos to Corte Madera for collaborating with Home Match to help residents remain in their existing homes. So I hope that brings some improvement. 38% haven't thought about the future and what they're going to do to take care of themselves. In the same way people don't think about disaster preparedness, a significant number haven't thought about their future compromised abilities. So we need to get people to think in terms of that. And yard maintenance and fire mitigation were barriers to keeping their home. Financial assistance for fire fuel reduction should be well publicized via the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority, and I don't think the word is getting around there. Next slide. residents shared over 60 different ways of saying thank you for doing this survey, which warmed my heart. And for your help in accomplishing this, I say thank you. I encourage the council members to read the report, the 26-page report that Sarah put together as a summary, and also check out the survey responses online, because the data and the respondents' comments do validate your upcoming consideration for a new intergenerational center. I am happy to answer any questions you have at this point, or we can go directly to the rousing applause and standing ovation.
Patty, thank you so much to you and age-friendly Corte Madera. This is fantastic work. We'll start with any questions from council members.
I just have one. You didn't specify whether or not you asked, and I took the survey, being a senior, whether or not you asked about amenities and facilities. And I'm just wondering whether the swimming pool once again came to the top of what everybody wants, or were there other things that seniors were asking for?
Do you want to address it? Do you want to come up here? Yes, the pool came up.
Yes, Councilmember Pat, it came up, it wasn't at the top. I would say the intergenerational center, or what people would express was a center where I could do X, Y, Z, came up as the top. But you will find in the back of the report, there were about 5 different possible ideas that came up in a broader group for public spaces. But the top was in a center.
Thank you. I'll check it out.
Mhm.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Any other questions from council members?
Yes, thank you, Patty. That was a wonderful report, and I look forward to spending even more time with the rest of the data. One of the questions that I had is that you mentioned a figure about where the population over 60 will be. I believe it was in 10 years. And do you have figures about where the population will be under that age, and or any data about the other age groups? Because, you know, that will influence the intergenerational aspect of this.
Yes, the California Department of Finance does a projection of all age groups. So if that is something this council would like, I'll put it together for Patty to submit to you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I'm curious more about the pools, or the pool.
About the pool?
About the pool, but it's more for seniors. Is there certain types of usage, right? Is it full lap swimming, or is it the exercise, standing in place, or what type of activities, health-wise or whatever, do they usually use the pool for?
It depends on what age group you're talking about, because this survey included people starting at age 60 and going up to over 90. So for myself, I love the aqua fitness. It moves my old lady knees around and keeps my cardio going. So that's much better than swimming laps, which I found boring. And the socialization is one of the main parts of the aqua fitness class. We're a hoot. And one thing I had thought about was some sort of mini pool that would have an area where you could do those kinds of things, but not be a massive pool.
Yeah.
And so I know that the Recreation Commission had a subcommittee to look into the possibility of the pool. They came back and said, not possible. And I said, but what about other iterations of a pool, a small thing?
When
So-
you're considering sites for the intergenerational, is that something that you would consider about whether it could be supported in that facility? The smaller kind of fitness pools?
Good question.
Okay. You don't have to answer it right now. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions from council members? All right, we'll open this up to public comment. If there's any members of the public that would like to comment on this presentation, please come on up to our podium if you're with us in person. And if you're on Zoom, please go ahead and put up your hand and we'll bring you on after we take in-person comment, and we'll turn it over to Carla.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Beckman and council members. I just wanted to emphasize how much I appreciate the response that we've gotten for this survey. I'm a member of Age-Friendly Corte Madera, as well as Age-Friendly Solutions, which I established, the 501c3, which was the financial arm supporting the intergenerational center. And to that, I just wanted to speak that it was gratifying to see the responses of people that said, we want our intergenerational center back. You know, what happened? And that for those that aren't aware, with COVID shut down, I transitioned everything to Zoom, and we flourished that way. When things started to open up, then I was encouraged to let Vivalon, with their new building, take over our programs. And although we had remained sustainable, with hard heart here, I let go. And but things now are changing, and people want the programs back in the community. And the 2-year agreement with Vivalon is coming to an end. I already have people waiting in the wings, unbelievably qualified instructors that would love to support the Intergenerational Center. And so I just wanted to just really confirm once again to all of you that I appreciate your support about reopening the center. To you council members and to Adam, our town manager, who, needless to say, I pester at no end to get this off the ground. And so I'm ready, whether it be to support Park and Rec or to get it started and turn it over to Park and Rec. But the community really, really wants it. And I want it for our community. It really made an impact. And we do have subscribers, over 600 subscribers to our newsletter. And we've got a terrific audience there awaiting. So I thank you for your consideration and that we can do this as timely as possible. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carla. Mayor Condon. Do we have any other in-person public comment tonight? I'm not seeing anyone else in person. Do we have any hands up on Zoom, Lorena?
We do not have any hands raised on Zoom and didn't receive emailed public comment for this item.
Okay, thanks. So we'll close public comment on this item and bring it back to the council if there are any last thoughts or discussion points.
I just have one. I just want to thank Patty and Sarah, and I want to say everybody on Age-Friendly on the board. I know Richard's here also. There was a lot of, people don't realize it, there was a lot of back and forth on that survey, trying to get the questions nailed down exactly, and even the formatting, how many pages. So there was a lot of work that went into it, but I think with the results, the percentage that came back, I think it was well worth it. So I appreciate all the hard work on that. And I think, Patty, I think you being on Park and Rec Commission now, I think that's going to add a dynamic to that commission, and you're going to serve maybe, I don't want an underserved population, the aging on that commission. So I think that's going to go far also. So thanks for doing that. Thanks though.
And I'll second everything Fred said, but add, thank you, Carla. The volunteers in this community just blow me away. I can't believe how much energy and passion you guys have for this. So I really appreciate all you're doing. Thank you.
Thanks so much to the Age-Friendly team, and congratulations on another great survey. And with that, we will close this item and move on to our consent calendar. These are items that are routine or have been discussed previously and do not require any further discussion. Any member of the council or public may pull an item from our consent calendar for discussion. Would any council members like to pull a consent calendar item? Seeing none, would any members of the public like to pull a consent calendar item or comment on the consent calendar? If you're here in person and you'd like to, come on up to our podium. If you're on Zoom and you'd like to pull a consent calendar item, please go ahead and raise your hand on Zoom and we'll bring you on. Hi there.
Arthur Young, Chapman Drive.
Are you pulling an item from the consent calendar, sir?
My email to get into the meeting didn't work, so I came here and I'm a few minutes late. Ordinarily, I I've been here 3 times. I have explained what my issue was.
Yeah, sir, I'm sorry. We're doing the consent calendar right now, so we're just following our agenda for tonight's meeting.
How can I talk tonight? Tim Berry just left.
You're welcome to speak with staff or council members after the meeting. If you'd like to, you can also submit any public comment via email.
Well, I've already submitted 3 times what my issue was, but nobody's paid attention to it.
Thank you, sir. At this time, we're following our agenda. We're dealing with the consent calendar right now, so I'm going to have to get us back to that item. But I appreciate your comment. Thank you. Lorena, do we have any hands up on Zoom for the consent calendar?
We do not have hands raised for the consent calendar, and we don't have public comment via email for that consent calendar either.
Okay, thank you. So with that, I'll bring the consent calendar back to council for discussion or a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent calendars, items 4A through 4K.
I'll second it.
Councilmember Casissa?
Yes.
Councilmember Lee?
Yes.
Councilmember Thomas?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Ravazio?
Yes.
Mayor Beckman?
Yes.
Thank you. The motion carries.
Great. Thank you very much. That concludes the consent calendar. We have no public hearings tonight, so we'll move on to business items, the first of which is 6A. This is consideration and possible approval of a response to the Marin County Civil Grand Jury report regarding e-bikes, and I will turn it over to staff.
Great. Thank you, Mayor Beckman and members of the council. I will be providing a brief presentation regarding staff's draft response to the Marin County Civil Grand Jury that was written in relation to e-bikes. The title of the Marin Grand Jury's report, dated April 26, 2024, was titled "With Power Comes Responsibility: Youths Under Age 16 Operating Class 2 E-Bikes, a Safety Risk." We are required to make a response to the grand jury by July 26th, which is a couple weeks. So this is our opportunity really to respond to the civil grand jury regarding this topic. And obviously, there have been many conversations over the last year regarding e-bikes in general. We've had conversations both at our BPAC committee, at the police council. I do want to focus and say this is a specific, very narrow topic tonight where we're focusing on specific findings and specific recommendations that were made by the civil grand jury and our response to those. So I'll be discussing that this evening. As outlined in the staff report, the Marin County Civil Grand Jury made 6 findings and 4 recommendations, again, which we're required to respond to. And staff has drafted a response that frankly takes some issue with the findings and the recommendations as outlined in the staff report. I'm not going to go into the specifics on the findings. We did write a cover letter that also provides a little bit of context for the civil grand jury so they understand that this is a topic that we've been discussing, working closely with our police chief and CMPA on, and take seriously. But ultimately understand that there are some existing tools in our toolbox and existing processes and work that we're doing that we feel is appropriate at this time. So the response mention with respect to the findings, I think the one that we said and drafted as wholly disagree with was just there's a finding that the civil grand jury found that the state has essentially abdicated its responsibility in regards to e-bike safety and youths. And I think there's a lot of state legislation, a lot of work's been done at the state level. There's also the California Vehicle Code that exists today. And so that's the one finding that was drafted as wholly disagree with. In terms of the recommendations, recommendation number R1, go to that in a second. The recommendation by the grand jury And again, very specific, by December 31st, 2024, the Board of Supervisors in each municipality shall take all necessary steps to adopt an ordinance with regard to Class 2 e-bikes with at a minimum the following provisions. And it basically talks about restricting Class 2 e-bikes to people age 16 or older, and operating, wearing helmets, and passengers as well wearing helmets. And so in this, the response that was drafted by staff really focuses on the fact that legal use of Class 2 e-bikes may be perfectly fine. It's what we're finding is the issue is that of e-motorcycles, frankly, those vehicles that are not even Class 2 e-bikes themselves, which are being ridden and caused by youth and frankly people of all ages, are causing the most concern and when it comes to safety. And so the response is outlined over several paragraphs, outlining essentially the some of the findings from CMPA and Chief Norton, who's worked on basically better understanding the issue when it comes to these e-motorcycles.
Adam, would you pause the presentation for a moment? Pat is concerned.
Adam, he's approaching from behind you and I just don't understand what his interest is. This man is approaching you from behind in a menacing manner and I wanted to draw attention to him. I believe he's got his hand in his pocket.
Need to pause.
I think you should keep it on the public record.
Happy to talk outside.
Is there a security officer here or somebody who could provide security for the moment? He's got something silver. Something silver in his pocket. Oh, Charles.
Recording stopped.
He has something silver in his pocket.
Yes. 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 Thank you.
I think we need to have security at our meetings. I've known him for a long time. He's not well. I've known him for decades and he's deteriorated and he left here with his hand in his pocket. I thought, why is he putting his hand in his pocket?
All right, we are resuming our meeting here. I'm sorry for the interruption. We had an interruption here in the council chambers. We are on item 6A on tonight's agenda, which is a discussion of a proposed response to a Marin Civil Grand Jury report related to e-bikes, and I will turn it over to staff to resume their presentation.
Thank you, Mayor and council members again. Okay, I think I was in the middle of describing our response to R1, which is the recommendation by the grand jury that the town adopted an ordinance by December 31st. I will just summarize essentially by saying, you know, we are working with partners on this issue. We do not feel an arbitrary date certain is the appropriate way to sort of go about sort of responding to youth, the safety issues regarding e-bikes and youth. We certainly recognize and understand there are a variety of different proposals out there, some working its way through state legislation. And ourselves, along with our police chief, are working on a variety of other measures as well. And we're working with other stakeholders in the county. And so we are certainly taking this issue seriously, but just disagree with the proposal to implement an ordinance by December 31st in this way. Plus the fact that legal Class 2 bike riding should be acceptable in our community. With regard to response 2 or R2, the draft response to the grand jury talks about establishing a joint task force or committee to investigate and consider coordination among the county and municipalities about adopting countywide uniform set of regulations regarding e-bike use. And so certainly there's already discussions about this and how best to implement that. So I think we're working through that with our Central Marin police officers, police chief association, who's also working with school districts locally. I will say Chief Norton will be coming to a town council meeting in the near future, I think in September or October, to describe and update the council on his work with the local school districts in terms of setting up a bike registration system at the schools, which will help in terms of just enforcing what bikes are allowed on those individual campuses. And so at this time, really, the time and energy it would take to create and participate in and collaborate amongst a countywide effort seems unnecessary and not warranted at this time. And so the response, and I would just remind the council, our responses have to be very specific in terms of how we respond. There's certain word choices. So I will say we're responding to both R1 and R2 that they will not be implemented because it is not warranted. And those are sort of one of the 4 choices I believe we have in which to respond to these grand jury recommendations. The similar response to R3, which is just a sort of follow-up on R2 recommendation by the grand jury. And if we're not doing that one, well, then this one follows that we're not doing that either. And the last one was really more of a recommendation for the Board of Supervisors, and so more appropriately responded to by the Board of Supervisors in terms of funding. So with that, I'm happy to end my presentation. Open it up for questions from the town council.
Thank you very much, Adam. We'll take questions from council members. We'll start on this side. Any questions?
I just want to kind of clarify some of the responses. They're in collaboration with Chief Norton, what CMPA is doing. Can you just give a bit of background on that?
Yeah, and he'll be here in September and October to describe more, but certainly the chiefs are in the county are all talking about how to what would help in terms of addressing the safety issues around e-bikes. I mean, obviously they're aware that there's been a lot of use of e-motorcycles, essentially what they are, that these are bikes that are going faster than they're supposed to. They're really not in compliance with the California Vehicle Code. So they're working on thinking about the best either enforcement actions that could be taken or potential regulatory frameworks that could be utilized through the California Vehicle Code or other measures that might be appropriate to sort of put in place, and it's sort of a forum for best practices essentially by the police chiefs. Chief Norton himself has been sort of a leader in trying to sort of pinpoint what the real issue is. And I think from his standpoint, this is really an issue better addressed by going after sort of the supply of the e-bikes and the manufacturers who are mislabeling and sort of representing what these vehicles these are. And really even to the point where potentially an avenue that should be potentially explored is working with the district attorney, both in Marin County and potentially in the state, to sort of address those issues from the manufacturing side of the bikes and the mislabeling of these and misrepresentation of these to parents of kids who may be actually purchasing these for legitimate, or thinking it's legitimate ways of getting around town. In fact, they're easily manipulated and then become essentially illegal vehicles that are traversing our roads and paths and so on and so forth.
Thanks.
Any questions?
No
Any
questions.
questions?
I'm sorry, I was a little distracted during that talk, so maybe I might have missed it. But did you talk about the relationship with our local schools that the police chief and others have also been discussing?
Yes, and I don't want to take, the chief will be here to explain in more detail, but broadly speaking, he's been working since I think the winter time, essentially, on trying to, I think he's been to the school district board meetings and has talked really about how to set up sort of a better system in place to prohibit certain types of vehicles and e-motorcycles from basically being stored on campuses. So I think that's a real concrete piece of something that he's going to measure that's going to be implemented this year. And in addition to that, he's gotten all of the basically email list of all the parents or the contact information of all the kids, and it's sent out. I think you've probably seen these emails, a very long but thorough explanation of what the rules are essentially behind e-bikes. And so he's sent a couple of those messages out to our local community, and the parents of all the children who are attending.
I know Dr. Brett Geitham often also speaks to the council. Do you know the next time that we anticipate him coming to the council to speak about?
It's not on our immediate agenda, but if that's something that perhaps when the chief comes, because
That'd be
I
great.
specifically wanted the chief to come and talk about this issue as well as another issue. And so that's one of the reasons why we didn't have him come to speak on the statistics, which it can be pretty, it's important, but it's sort of I would rather him focus his time on sort of specific issues that our community is facing. So perhaps that's a good time that I could ask him to come. They could address us together, although I know his chief's been really working closely with the high schools and then trying to also work with Hall Middle School rather than the elementary schools at this time.
Okay, thanks.
Great, thank you. Any other questions from council members? And if not, we'll open this item up to public comment. So if you are with us in person and would like to make public comment on this item, please come on up to our podium here. If you're on Zoom and would like to make public comment, please go ahead and raise your hand and we will bring you online as soon as we finish our in-person comment. Public comment will be given 3 minutes apiece, and we'll start with Bob.
Thank you. Bob Middlestead for e-bike access. Just a couple of points. This morning, we went to the Board of Supervisors and they agreed to change their response to say that they will implement all the recommendations. I encourage you to do that. If there's any surprise, I can go into that a little bit more, but I've just got 3 minutes unless I can get a little bit more. But your response is basically you don't have enough evidence that the throttle bikes, which is what I'm going to call the class 2, are more dangerous than anything else. So if that's the way you feel, I respectfully submit that you should say you need further analysis. It's a little harsh to say you will not implement. If you don't have enough evidence one way or the other, let's just go with further analysis, because as soon as 1778 is passed next month, the county is going to enact the ordinance saying you got to be 16, and they're going to look to the towns and cities and towns to do the same thing. And I don't want you to be locked in where you've got to basically thumb your nose at what the Board of Supervisors has done and wants you to do. So I would go with further. And then on 2 and 3, calling for a task force, the county this morning agreed to have a subcommittee look at all these issues, the e-motorcycles and everything we're talking about. I think you should want to have a seat on that. And if you say a task force is not warranted, maybe you don't get a seat. So again, further analysis is required is a lot better than saying, no, we're not going to do it no matter how much you want us to. The good news is we've been after this since the spring on the Super 73s. Super 73s are the illegal motorcycles labeled class 2. Work closely with Chief Norton. He's my hero. He's the first guy who said publicly Super 73s are illegal and our kids will not be allowed to ride them. That was April. We tried to get a school registration program by the end of the school year, and we were told, no, we're too busy. We need one now. We need one before the fall semester starts. And, instead of generalities, I'd really like to hear some specifics. Jonathan and I are working with Mill Valley, 2 council people, 2 school board members, and the police chief to work out the details on a registration program. But here's the problem. We know Super 73s are illegal. We know that you have about 25 e-bikes at Hall. They're throttles. 14 of them are Super 73. There's 5 others that are illegal in my.
Oh, I think that meant
Oh,
the end of the 3 minutes.
That was a fascinating time cue.
Ah,
I tried,
If you
Yeah.
could
I tried
hold
to
your
change
applause
it.
and give me 1 minute.
I'm going to have to ask you to wrap up, Bob. I'm
Okay.
really sorry. We just have to stick to the same time limit for each person.
Okay, so
longer.
problem with the school registration is figuring out what's legal and illegal. The beauty of the minimum age is I think 75, 85% of them are illegal. With the minimum age, the school can just
Thank
say.
you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Bob. And we do have your written public comment as well, which I believe we've all read and I know we've all received. Thank you very much. Jonathan. And I'm sorry, Bob. It's just we have to have the same time allotment per person. So,
I just asked because President Rodoni gave me an extra minute.
thank you.
I would have.
Jonathan Freeman, I've been working with Bob now probably a year when I brought it to our nonprofit. And the progress we've made, having a budget that is, I think, less than 1% of what of the my coalition has been really good, getting sports basements to start selling them and Best Buy, taking provisions out of a proposed law. So there's been a lot of winnable parts to this. And I think, like Bob, I know I'm going to be pushy, and we're activists. We can afford to be on this issue, and we're always going to be talking to all the different entities that we've done. It's been quite an education going all to the different towns and cities, and some of them we know all about how the streets are paved and what kind of condition they're in, because we have to sit through the meeting before we get a chance to talk. It gives us a chance to feel what kind of environment that you guys have here, what they have all around. And so it just tells me we're going to keep on working to keep to make sure that we get a really good ordinance passed, because there's so many different leverage points. There's the schools, there's your law enforcement, there's education. And we have a conversation on Thursday with somebody who does digital marketing to see how we can help with that as a private, a nonprofit, so we can get the word out there a lot more. This is not going away, but I think it's a winnable battle. And one last thing, I got a minute here. What I noticed is that if you look at all the bad injuries amongst this group, 10 to 15, all of them are white kids. So they're affluent, and their parents are affluent. They can spend $3,000 to $4,000 on these bikes. And it reminds me of the laws that brought about the social host ordinance. It's the same type of mindset. And so that's another thing we're up against. And I think it's very beholden to Marin because of the assets that we seem to possess here. $1 billion in the community above the Marin Community Foundation. So that's something we're up against. And I know that you've heard, Eli, from parents who are want their kid to have a good bike, but they can still pedal on a Class 1. So hope you do some strong steps.
The Academy Awards, you know.
I don't know why the sound changed.
Thank you very much. We're going to
Sorry
turn
about
to Zoom public comment now. Lorena, do we have any hands up on Zoom from folks who would like to give public comment on this item?
We do, and I'll apologize for the sound change. That's kind of distracting. There was a different sound that we had previously. I don't know why it's different now. We have 2 hands raised from Sanford, Redlick, and Roy Wolford, and we did receive emailed public comment from Bob, and I can't remember the other person, and that has been uploaded to the website and is available for the public to view.
Great, thank you.
We'll start with Sanford.
Great. Thank you very much. I have to say I'm in favor of the new sound. I think that's funny. Mayor Beckman, council members, thank you. So our son is 14, became an avid e-bike rider after the pandemic ended, went back to school. We live on the Corte Madera side of Ring Mountain, and his school is in Tiburon. And, I want to say that the e-bike gave him freedom, happiness, enjoyment of the outdoors, friendships. The dangers are real. The benefits for the young people are also tremendous. And I see in your consideration of this report that you take that seriously. And I just want to say how much I appreciate that. There's a balance to be struck between danger and benefit. The one of the things I'd like to support is, I guess, Officer Norton is going to be presenting about regulation. Trying to regulate the bikes as objects can be problematic because they're electronically controlled. It's very difficult to see what power output the bikes have. But licensure is actually an opportunity because the kids really want these things. They want to be able to use them because they have so much freedom and benefit for them. And it's a chance to teach them about the dangers of speed, the rules of the road, how to collaborate with our police officers, how to be respectful to people on our shared bike paths, and so on. And I think it could be a big benefit, especially because a lot of these kids will soon be driving cars and have to face really similar issues. So I personally, I have a lot of experience with these bikes and I don't see the value of removing a throttle. I think the issue is much more about teaching the kids proper behavior within the community so that they can get the benefits, but the community and the kids themselves can stay safe. So I really appreciate your work and thoughtful consideration of all of this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sanford.
Okay. And then Roy Wolford.
Okay, good evening. Please, on the sound at the conclusion of my portion of the speak now, go out with Spirit in the Sky. I'd like to have a few bars of that one played. On the e-bike, I'm going to call it motorized wheels, whether it be one wheel, two wheel, three wheel, four wheel, on multi-use paths. Say most bike riders, whether they're motorized, e-ized, or leg propelled, are respectful of walkers and runners and that sort of thing. But there are some that just blow by you, and they've got to be going a good 15 to 20 miles an hour on the multi-use paths. I would recommend getting an ordinance and work with Chief Norton on having no more than a 5-mile-an-hour speed limit for any motorized wheels when there's pedestrians involved. Because some of these bikes are, 90 to 150 pounds. If they collide with a person, they're going to do a lot of damage. And then also observing when they have a rider on the back of their bike. I've seen probably, I'm going to guess, 15, 16-year-old girls. The girls on the back seat have sandals, and their sandals are a couple of inches from the ground. And all they got to do is make a sharp turn or something, and the rider is going to lose a foot. So that would be my suggestion: is look for speed limits. Be very easy for an officer to gauge speed coming up from behind or going toward a walker or runner. The other item, and this happened earlier, and it was termed an incident or something. I mean, you couldn't make it up. Here you have age-friendly Corte Madera presentation, then they have an elderly man come in who is obviously having some issues with being able to converse with either staff or council members, and he kind of got the bum rush. And then it wound up in perhaps a scary moment where it was said that he was sneaking up and perhaps had a gun in his pocket. And we can all understand the concern for public meetings and officials with what just happened on Saturday. But I think it could have been handled a lot better by assigning someone to talk with the gentleman to find out what was going on so they could address his issues, whether valid or not. So with that, please hit the Spirit in the Sky button. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Roy. Lorena, do we have any other hands up on Zoom for public comment on this item?
No additional hands raised on this item.
Okay, so we will close public comment on this item and bring it back to the council for discussion. We'll start on this side. Any thoughts?
Like mine kind of went to a question based on some of the comments is for these grand juries, these are not binding arrangements we're making with the grand jury, and they're just our current understanding and response to a mandatory question, right? And to the best of our knowledge and within our comfort zone currently, how we would like to respond, but no, does not hold us to any kind of future precedent or response matrix, like given a different political sway or change, right? So I just wanted to ask, is that true?
Yes, yeah, there's nothing binding in here if we were to on our response, if we or keep the response as is, it's not binding. I will say, town council in the past has tried to live up to its responses and the best it can, and so therefore I think in that regard, we take it as seriously as we can and provide the best response in the moment of the time.
I like to listen to all the comments and try to find the best win-win. And part of it is having the flexibility to always adapt to given situations. But, that's where it turns to my commentary. I have reviewed this. I am on the police council. I have talked at, with the supervisors and others at the Marin mayors and address this even at the state level with some people. I feel our answers I'm comfortable with them. I think that they seek a greater solution than individual ordinances at the city level or even at the county level, but really feel like if it truly is a safety issue, and also in listening to the police chief, that, it's really a DMV and other items. And then the other thing is enforcement. I saw 3 kids twice and like riding in the streets. And it's like, even if I was a police officer and was like, how do I address this? Right. Or if and that's police who he says, unless they're on the streets, they can't enforce it on some of this stuff. Right. Then on our paths and parks, right, it would come down to our, code enforcement officers, which aren't equipped to even address it. Right. So I don't know that the ordinance is the right path to ultimately try to address this issue. It's not saying that it isn't an issue, or there's a lot of different ways to try to help those children be safer, because one of the kids was doing a wheelie and crashed into a car in front of him, showing off with his friends. And I didn't think, oh, that's okay. I stopped and asked him if he was okay, and he was, luckily. But, it really is about the safety of the children. And so also, I think with this, while it doesn't answer the call, the question is this council actually enabled and staff within this town to address this much broader issue? And that's why I think it should be done at a higher level to bring better safety to all children and not just a single or a few communities that have the resources. So that's how I feel, and I can support our answers.
Thank you.
Yes, in reading the staff report, something that became very clear to me is that the different classes of bikes it's complicated. And I think that parents don't know what they are purchasing. And that in itself is, I think the first job is for parents to have a way of knowing what these bikes are, what they can do, what's legal, should they be licensed. All of that groundwork needs to be done first. First, but I think the other issue is that these bikes were adapted so quickly that no one had any time to analyze what might happen, how they might be modified, who would ride them, would they have helmets, what would parents go, you're 12, you can't have one yet. none of this was analyzed. And so what what I would love to see is going back to the manufacturer, having them have some kind of financial responsibility within the education process. Regarding this document itself that we are considering to hand back to the grand jury, I don't think anything that's in that would override any upcoming legislation from either the county or the state. So this is our response to specifically that document. And so I would support submitting that document as it stands.
Thank you, Rosa. Comments down here?
Yeah, I can support the document the way it is, because just to clarify again, Adam, which is something Charles said, this isn't anything legally binding. Because one thing I noticed is I agree with you on the R3, if there was a task, if the county create a task force, which I think it needs to be countywide. I think if every town and city in Marin County creates their own task force, I don't think that's going to work. It seems like there needs to be one that covers the county, so everybody is on the same page. This doesn't prohibit us from like going, we could still participate in that, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay.
We would. I would recommend we would.
And I think another key thing, I think it is education. And I think the education starts with the parents. I think that's where it's got to start with them. They're the ones who are buying the bikes. They're the ones who, it's their children. And I think they need to look at protecting their children. So I think a lot of it has to do with education. One thing I would like to see, and maybe it ties back to Chief Norton, is I think there needs to be some kind of a plan, because there's all these little fragmented pieces out. You know, the state is doing this, the county's looking at doing this. Central Marin Police, I think they're doing really good work working with Redwood. I'm not sure how much work they're doing with Hall. It's fragmented out. Somehow there needs to be an overarching plan so everybody knows what is going on and what we're doing. And one other thing also, we keep talking public schools, which I assume that's where the majority of the bikes are. I haven't heard any mention about any education to the private schools, like Marin Country Day School, Marin Primary. I'll say St. Patrick's is in there also. And again, I'm just looking at the ones within Corte Madera. I would assume that there's less children going to those schools, but there's still e-bikes that they're probably using.
Fred, can I?
Yeah, go ahead.
So the way that I respond to that, though, is one is a public entity that is vested interest in the public health and safety and a certain level of public in a private enterprise, the children's privacy and other things, if the school doesn't want to interact at that level, right? There's not the same health and safety impetus that you would find in a public school, right? So I don't know, and I haven't heard whether they've reached out to them, but it might be something related to that also, that, you know, in those instances, there's not public accountability within those institutions. And so a direct government to government agency is a much easier dialogue.
Right. And again, you're right. I don't know if there's been any outreach to them, but the bottom line is those bikes are not being driven within private school property. They're driven on our paths. They're driven on our streets. So to me, it still is a public safety issue. I know what you're saying because they're private schools, but again, I think we just need to make sure we're being inclusive and trying to cover as much base as we can.
I think outreach is great. It's just, I just wonder why that decision might be made, right? So trying to think further about what you're saying. And
right, it's just something for consideration. And one other thing, which I can't remember if I brought this up before, because I sit on Ross Valley Paramedic Authority, and I think earlier this year, every quarter they come out with stats about the paramedic runs. I'd asked them if they could nail down e-bike stats, which they did at our last meeting. Those are being refined. And there's some caveats in there where not all the data is fed into a computer. Some of it is narrative and somebody has to pull that data out. But I know I forwarded that data to Chief Norton, so he's aware of it, because again, those are paramedics that are going out on runs regarding other things, but including e-bikes. And that report does include Southern Fire. It's just the way the report is done. But again, I think it's just another piece of the puzzle. So those are my comments. Thanks.
Okay, well, I'm kind of been all over the map on this one because When I first read the response to the grand jury.
Oh, good call.
Oh, so sorry. So I just think the grand jury needs to know sometimes when there's too many cooks, you spoil the broth. And they came out with this, here's what needs to happen. Even though I felt good, it was the jury took it on, but I think it would be more productive if they would support already existing coordinated efforts. And that's when I realized that that's what Corte Madera wasn't doing. So I don't want to vote to say yes to this response to the grand jury until I know more. I need to understand more of the nuances with regard to the machines. I agree with Rosa so much that the parents aren't intentionally buying things that are going to kill their kids. They're just not. COVID hit these kids hard. The parents are still trying to make it up to them that their life sucked for a couple years by buying them expensive things. And I think what the parents need to do, we need to tell the parents to do, take that bike back to the manufacturer and throttle it down. They can change those engines pretty easily to reduce, and somehow maybe there's a certification that this has been reduced so it's not that powerful. I have recently seen a lot of kids. I drive around a lot being a realtor. I see a lot of kids out there on their bikes. And for the most part, maybe I'm just lucky. I see them being really careful right now. I think they've heard about kids getting in accidents, but that doesn't mean we don't enforce the law. I think we should support this collaborative countywide task force. They probably need a professional facilitator. My guess is when you bring together the police chief and the bike guys and everybody's talking at once, and then we want to get the schools involved, it's a yatterfest and they're never going to accomplish anything. But maybe we could help hire a professional facilitator that would go in and say, this needs to be done and figured out before school starts. So get on it. And you've got August and make it happen fast. I don't know who that facilitator would be. I think I could do it. Anyway, Marin parents want to do what's best. You mentioned the social host ordinance. That's so true that, Marin parents mean well, but sometimes they're just a little bit too wealthy for their own good. And letting kids have parties and letting kids ride fast motorcycles, neither one are a good idea. And I think they'll come around and really support it. But so I don't want to say yes to saying this because I feel like then we've acted like we solved something when I don't think we have. And I'll volunteer to
So
do more work
for
on this.
matter of clarity, then would you be abstaining from the vote? Is that actually a possibility? Is that, or just say
Well,
no?
if you guys, we don't always have to be 5-0.
Yeah.
Well, no, but
it's fine.
it's a question of whether you vote yes or no, or if you can abstain.
We'll
on
find
this.
out, I
Yeah,
guess.
that's right.
Amy will tell us.
So Eli, just one thing. We have to respond to the grand jury, correct? And we have to respond by a certain date, correct? We have no choice.
Oh, that's a good point.
So, yeah, I do want to just clarify that Penal Code 933.05 requires the response to the grand jury. It limits how you can do it. So I think part of the problem is we have to follow the penal code, but it's not necessarily designed for every issue. So in terms of each recommendation, the town only has 4 options. It's been implemented with a summary regarding implementation. It has not yet been implemented, but will be implemented in the future with a time frame, and you're bound to, I think, 6 months for the time frame. The time frame may not, but the recommendation requires further analysis with an explanation and the scope and parameters of an analysis or study and the time frame, and that time frame can only be 6 months, or the recommendation will not be implemented because it's not warranted or is not reasonable with an explanation therefore. So I think, a little bit we're constrained by this format because it doesn't necessarily lend itself well to every situation. But I just want to let you know that is part of why things are phrased the way they are.
And just out of curiosity, ramifications for no response?
Good question.
I don't know. I've never actually been asked that question. But the grand jury serves the Superior Court, so they'd get a court order requiring us to respond is my best guess.
All right, thanks.
Just a follow-up question. Would it be okay to make some edits to the letter tonight before we approve it?
Well,
So
sorry,
perhaps-
so there's a cover letter and then there's the actual responses. So, but yeah, that's,
But if we just put a note in the cover letter, maybe up the front, that we wanted to do a conscientious and thorough job responding, but please know that these efforts have been in works for several months and we're working on them with our police chief and our schools officials and, so these are tentative kind of responses and things could change depending on what's decided by a larger group of people working on it.
there's a cover letter that actually includes a lot of that language in the cover letter to the grand jury. And I specifically elaborated on it compared to
Did
the
I miss
one for
that? Was that in the
cybersecurity.
packet?
I think it's the first, it's on the first attachment, cover letter. And so just one paragraph, the town remains committed to promoting safe e-bike usage within our community. We'll continue to explore alternative approaches and collaborate with relevant agencies to address safety concerns related to e-bikes. And we thank the grand jury for the valuable contribution to our community.
Okay.
The second to last paragraph, which kind of says that, yes, we're concerned about this issue. We will continue, but in response to the specific recommendations, we are not recommending going.
Also, just a matter of clarity, this is a town document that's produced by the town, and we're just accepting that it can go out as a town document. It's not our personal vestiture in the document itself and assigning accountability to each individual. Is that correct? So we've read your report, right? We've seen the research from staff and the town and anyone involved with it, right? But if one of the council members has not felt like they are so informed to comfortably move it forward, it's really the town that's putting it forward and not the individual council members that are putting this document out there. And is that correct? Or is it actually a document of the council and each individual is accountable to it?
I don't think it's any different than any other.
It's a town document.
It's a town document, right? So, it's saying, I feel comfortable that Adam and any other staff members or council that were involved with it have put their best efforts into answering it. And if you feel comfortable with that, it's not you personally feeling that you had the responsibility to do that, right? And that's what I thought I heard you were concerned about.
I have a suggestion that I think could make it super easy. All you have to do is add "at this time." So second paragraph, first line, after careful consideration and coordination with Central Marin Police Authority, Corte Madera has determined that the town will not be implementing the recommendations outlined in the report at this time, while we evaluate blah, 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 blah. And then I think I'm fine with it.
I would support that change. I've also got a few thoughts to add. So first of all, I don't want us to get bogged down here in this discussion. We're not setting policy tonight. We're not, we are somewhat constrained in the format here, but what I'm hearing and what I see in the proposed document is that we are absolutely committed to addressing this issue. This is a serious issue, and we understand that. We've heard that loud and clear from our community members and from activists. So we are serious about addressing it. We do not want to abdicate our responsibility to be part of the solution here. I think, the approach that I think I'm personally envisioning is I would like to see us start with a less restrictive approach and maybe ratchet up from there if we're not seeing the results that we need. I think, frankly, my reading of the grand jury report is it comes out very strong in favor of you should ban e-bikes for people under 16 right now. I'm not saying that that's not ultimately, what might be necessary, but I'd like to try other avenues first before we get there. And so that's kind of how I'm approaching the document here. And that's, why I'm supportive of what's proposed here. I will certainly look forward to hearing from Chief Norton what is realistic in terms of enforcement regarding like speed, bike capability, like an officer's ability to, I don't know, be on a bike path with a radar gun. I've never seen that, or, you know, things like, I just want to hear a little bit more about what this looks like, what enforcement looks like in real life. But I do think it's important that we, you know, I want to start with behaviors before bans. And to me, what that means is it's parents, right? Making sure that parents are informed about what they're buying for their kids, whether they're safe, whether they're legal. It's public education for children, for youths, and how they're riding these bikes. I think I absolutely want kids to be able to ride e-bikes, and I think they should even be able to ride throttle e-bikes as long as they can do so safely. And I know that they can. The question is, will they? We'll find out. But I think we should do what we can to help them, you know, comply with the law and comply with safe riding. And then lastly, I really do think that a big part of the core issue here is what I would call somewhat nefarious behavior from e-bike manufacturers, right? If you are manufacturing or selling an electric motorcycle and you're marketing it as an e-bike, that is fundamentally dishonest. And I think we need to, you know, frankly, I think we need to come down on that because it's not safe. It's not right. It's misleading parents. It's misleading consumers. It's going to wind up with parents spending significant sums of money buying bikes that are illegal that they have no idea are illegal. So I think that, frankly, I think that that is like a primary avenue to pursue there. And that's something that I am extremely concerned about. You know, other than that, I think I think, as we heard, I think if there is a countywide task force that is formed on this, even if we may not feel at this time that, you know, that's the best way forward, even if we feel at this time that we're confident in the police chief's working group, I can guarantee you that if there is a task force, countywide task force that is formed, Corte Madera will be at the table, because we are not, you know, we're a team player when it comes to these issues that are countywide issues. The last thing I'll say, and this I think maybe goes back to a discussion that it would be good to have with Chief Norton when he joins us, is I'd love to hear a little bit more about if there's a possibility to do some sort of school registry program, what that looks like, how or whether it would be appropriate for the town or CMPA to support. Because I do want to, you know, I do want to get creative, and I do want to get stakeholders together to see how we can figure out solutions here. And I don't see this proposed document as, you know, barring our ability to do that. And I think Charles said it best. This is not binding. This is kind of our current assessment of the lay of the land, but this is a dynamic issue. We're always learning more. And so I think we're going to continue to adapt as more information becomes known to us. So with that, I'm happy to support the draft response as written, but I would ask that we include, as Pat requested, the addition of at this time into the cover letter there, just so that we can make clear in our response to the grand jury that this is not something where we're saying case closed, we don't want any part of this. This is something where we really want to stay involved and learn more and plug in where it's appropriate and going to be effective for us to do so. Any other comments from council members?
I can support that too.
Well said, Mayor, well said. I agree with all his points.
All right, so with that, if there's no other comments, I'll go ahead and make the motion that we go ahead and authorize the mayor to sign the response letter to the grand jury and direct staff to send the response letter to the grand jury with the change that were noted by Pat.
A second.
Okay. Councilmember Casissa?
Yes.
Councilmember Lee?
Yes.
Councilmember Thomas?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Ravazio?
Yes.
Mayor Beckman?
Yes.
Thank you. The motion carries.
And
Thank you.
could I just make one also request that haven't too fast? That when there are opportunities for involvement with this countywide group that come through staff, that we hear them and about them and have an opportunity to join into those efforts.
Thank you. Absolutely.
Great, thank you. That concludes item 6A. We're going to move on with our agenda. Adam, did you want to combine staff reports on any of these MOU items, or how did you want to handle that?
Yeah. Thanks, Mayor Beckman. I was going to actually talk sort of as a whole about the three different, there's 2 employment resolutions and 1 memorandum of understanding with SEIU. And then take questions as a group or individually, and then the town council may provide direction on each of those items individually, if you so wish. And as a reminder, this is a 2-meeting item, so this is just essentially an introduction of 2 of them, you know, the resolutions that you're seeing in your packet. And then at August 20th, the intention is to bring those back for a final approval. So with that, And I'll get into some of the nuances between the different, there's certainly differences between the three different employment resolutions or MOUs that we'll be discussing here tonight. But so, and just for context, this is sort of the first time that several or maybe a couple of our council members have been through the contract approval process. So try to lay some context here in that what we're looking at tonight is three separate items. As I mentioned, two employment resolutions. The first dealing with, we have three different bargaining units for town employees covering 42 full-time town employees. The first group consist of department heads, which are 5 town employees and our department heads and our assistant town manager. Then we have a class of employees under mid-managers, professional, technical, confidential employees. And those are about 30. That's the bulk of our town staff. And that consists of, you know, our planners, our engineers, our building official, building department employees, administration and finance staff. So that's really the bulk of our employees are in that grouping. And then we have 7 employees that are part of the Services Employee International Union. And that's our maintenance staff over at the Courtyard. And they're represented by a union, the SEIU union. And so this was my first opportunity to actually be in a negotiating position with our town staff. And it started back in about February or March, where we sat down. And I really want to thank Janet Thiessen, our human resources manager, who supported me in this endeavor. Daria Carrillo, who's also, and Stacy Charlebois, who helped obviously with the financial cost aspect of this as we're going through negotiations. That's a big part of this. And then certainly our representatives from mid-managers, Mike Moriarty, Lorena Barrera, and also Wes Sichler, and then our SEIU representatives, who are Udeni, Neil Hagberg, right now. But in any case, a lot of work and energy and effort went into this by not only myself and Janet, but certainly with many members of our town staff. And so I just want to recognize the efforts on all, and really it was a very collaborative, cooperative process. I think a really healthy process. I was really impressed with a lot of the frank conversations, the trust that was sort of bestowed both ways across the table at some of these conversations. I like to call them discussions, conversations. We're here to have a really healthy discussion about what contracts, what is going to make us, and we've talked about this, how are we going to maintain competitiveness and also be strong in terms of attracting new good talent to the town, but also retaining our employees as well. And that's really certainly all balanced by what's financially and fiscally responsible and the constraints that we obviously have in that regard. And so there's an understanding back and forth, and it's sort of a learning curve in that regard. That's really what I went into the discussions with those goals in mind, wanting to, again, our employees are our greatest asset in terms of accomplishing our work plans, also meeting the expectations of our community. And then, of course, again, as I mentioned, balancing that with our fiscal health. So very pleased with the outcome here. I will say we are during this negotiation cycle, we are in the midst of ending a 3-year cycle. One of the key things is making sure that we could advance another 3-year cycle of essentially contracts. I'll call them contracts at this point, but agreements, maybe is a better word. That provides some stability, that provides, I think, a good foundation for us moving forward over the next few years to accomplish work plans and to not essentially have to do this on every year, 2 years. With that, I'll just say some of the major economic pieces of this, of all of the agreements that were already have been ratified by the different bargaining units. Essentially, they have voted for these and accepted them. Included over the 3 years, increases of 4% in 2024, July 2024, 3% in July 2025, and 3% again in the first full pay period of 2026. Over the course of the 3 years, a 10% increase in pay. And then obviously there's a number of other sort of benefits that are included as well in this package of amendments to the prior MOU. Sort of this was really built off of the prior MOU, which we've included the red line version in your packets as well, and clean versions. And those obviously the greatest cost here comes from those the cost of living increases. The COLA is the 4.33 over 3 years. In our research, really that's right in line with what our neighboring jurisdictions have really approved in the last negotiating rounds and the contracts, whether that's Larkspur is frankly more, Mill Valley, San Anselmo as well. So we've looked at our surrounding neighborhood, our neighbors as well, in terms of what recent contracts were approved. And that was understood and where we landed on that. Some other benefits that are again outlined in the staff reports for these agreements. There are several other benefits that are included here, including one that something that I thought was really important was to add, we hadn't looked at our health savings accounts and our retirement medical benefit for our employees since about 2011. And so those were increased per employee, depending on the years of service, from currently it was at $1,200 and $1,500 per employee, and those respectively were increased to $1,500 and $1,875 per year. The longer years of service, the greater benefit there. Importantly, also, and this may actually provide some cost savings, we provided a clause that allowed for opt-out of medical coverage, which we haven't had before. But if somebody has essentially medical coverage through their spouse, they can now actually get a small $350 a month stipend, essentially, for not taking the town's health insurance, which ultimately would be a significant cost savings for the town. Right now, there's just no incentive for any employee to actually take advantage of that. So most people will just, why not have double coverage through my spouse and through for myself? There were some, I really wanted to listen to what were the top priorities of our staff as well. And so things like a supplemental dental fund, which as those costs keep going up and as dental insurers keep opting out of being basically coverage, that was becoming more and more of a factor, the cost of just doing regular dental maintenance. And so $400 a year ability to basically dip into additional resources there, should it be needed, only if the employee had already actually reached the maximum allowed by our current insurance, which is coverage of $2,000. One of the other main things that our employees all really advocated for and wanted was an ability to cash out some of their leave if they weren't actually going to use it. So the request came in at a very high number of hours, wanting to exchange that for pay, but ultimately we settled on 24 hours. Basically, our department, this doesn't apply to our department heads. Our department heads are already allowed to use, basically get paid for 40 hours of their admin leave if they're not able to take it, but this would apply to our SEIU unit and also our new managers as well. 24 hours there. We did add, importantly, added Juneteenth as a floating holiday. That means that we're not going to be closing on that holiday, but we will be acknowledging it as a floating holiday. Employees can take that day off on that day itself, or use it between then and the end of June, or essentially get paid for it as well. There were some other more, let's see. We did ask, one of the other things that was added, this is a recognition of current wellness benefits, has a green commuting piece to it, which allows somebody to basically get paid, use a benefit to support individuals taking Smart Train if you live in Sonoma, and so was essentially a yearly get paid for. The town would cover your expenses related to public transit. One thing we've seen more and more, I will say, is people not coming from areas that are covered, you're able to get here on public transit, and so it's either, frankly, in the East Bay and coming across the Santa Fe Richmond Bridge. And personally, I think we should be recruiting more from San Francisco and like some of the outer neighborhoods there, because it's actually a reverse commute and it's a nice way to get here. And we're finding some employees who are actually living in the Golden Gate, Richmond district or what have you. It's a quick jump, and so covering some of the fast track expenses related to bridge tolls was something that was added as well. And so those are pretty consistent. I will say that last piece was really the mid-manager group and the department heads. I will focus on SEIU a little bit because there's just some adjustments there. When we looked at, and I start from the place, and I should have mentioned this, we're trying to be right in the essentially a little bit above the mean or median from a county-wide standpoint. We look at our competitive Marin County as a whole when we look at our other salary schedules in other cities. And so that was a goal to really keep us a little bit above, maybe around the top third, the bottom range of the top third. We're not competing with San Rafael necessarily because they're a bigger organization. But of the towns and cities our size, I think we're trying to be at the top of that to attract the greatest talent there. And I think what we noticed when we looked at SEIU as well was we were behind. So there was an adjustment across for our maintenance, our senior maintenance positions, and our equipment mechanic to bring that entire pay scale up 2% before then adding the 4.33%. And I do think, I mean, I meant to mention this at the beginning, but the consistency across, besides that 2% equity adjustment, I mean, I think I'm trying to really treat all of our employees in the same manner from a pay standpoint. And so in any case, bringing SEIU employees up a little bit and then adding on top of that the 10% over 3 years was a way to sort of balance and make that consistent pay over the 3 years across our agency and implement that. The other unique thing in SEIU that we have is that we have a lot of training that gets done, and there's specialized work, especially in the SD2 work that can be a little bit more hazardous and requires training as well. And so, one way to actually recognize the training and basically recognize the skills that come with that training was to add certification pay, and it's essentially an incentive pay there too. As our staff gets trained up in certain skills and maintains certifications, they're able to achieve a higher salary as well. I think that's important, and in the sanitary district area arena, because standalone sanitary district employees are being paid higher wages, and we want to retain our staff who we're investing in, who are learning the skills, and who are actually then learning our systems and learning how to work in a safe manner on our systems. So I'll stop there. I mean, those are the main, I covered a lot, but I just wanted to try to be as transparent, cover as much as I could for the public that may be listening, and for frankly some of our staff who haven't heard about other some of our other bargaining units and what they're where we plan to get those negotiations. So with that, I'll open up for questions from the town council. And thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much, Adam. We'll take questions from council members and we'll start over here.
Thanks. Cost versus budget. How much is it costing us? If you want to give a global high level number. You don't have to break
As
down
I was
like-
writing that question down, I was like, Fred's going to ask this. But yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So I will start with our, first off, I should say, yes, what we budgeted in the 24-25 budget, we added at that time, we did add a $100,000 contingency. We were assuming 3.5% increase in 24-25, and then we weren't sure where we were settling on some of these other numbers as well. But we're confident that that doesn't need to be adjusted. Like we're good with what we budgeted for there. The increases themselves over the 3 years, if you go 4-3-3, the percentages themselves are about $557,000. In
So
total,
is that a year? Is that for all 3
that's
years?
for all three.
Okay.
And then adding on top of that, we added the 100,000. So I'm going to assume we're adding about 275,000 on top of that. So if you do the math there, you're at 7. I should never do this without writing it down. But it's at it's a total of about $830,000 approximately. And some of this will depend on how many people take advantage of the various different benefits that are in there. So that's why I'm just giving you an approximate number and not a hard number there as well. And again, that's for the 42 town employees, full-time town employees.
The 100,000, because I thought the budget meeting came up that some of that money is for Central Marin Fire, because we hadn't negotiated their contract yet. I know that's being worked on.
That was actually in the Central Marin Fire budget.
Okay.
Where we had a contingency there. And then, so obviously that process is wrapping up as well. And I think on August 11th, we'll have that conversation with the Central Marin Fire, the council there, and we'll discuss budget. And that will have ramifications ultimately after that on the town's budget.
Okay, thanks. I'm sorry, Eli, I have a few more. Do we maintain any demographics on employees as far as where they live? In other words, East Bay versus San Francisco versus Sonoma County. It would just be something, if we don't, of interest.
No, I think that's a really great idea. I have a sort of a mental picture in my head about geography and where everyone's coming from, but actually mapping that would be kind of an interesting exercise.
Okay, and then fast track, that's new for this year, reimbursing for
Yes.
fast track?
Yes.
Okay. And then some of these I can't remember. Vacation, it's maybe more policy. They're not allowed to carry over, or can't, or is
So
they're limited, right?
vacation is allowed to carry over up to a total cap for mid-managers. It's 300 hours.
Okay.
And for SEIU, it's 260 hours, I want to say. So it caps out. Admin leave, which is the other sort of, that does not carry over.
Okay. And then I noticed there's a thing here about 980 schedule.
Yes.
Do we have a lot of employees working a 980 schedule? I'm not going to 410, but either or.
We do. We have quite a few of our, especially a professional mid-manager team that does work on 980 schedules. I'd say the majority of them actually do.
Okay.
At this point. So it's essentially every other Friday is off.
Okay, right. Thanks for that, because I used to work a 980 schedule. It works out really well. Just a couple other questions. the 2%, I want to say adjustment for the SCIU. How did you, 2% doesn't seem like much.
It came from basically the compensation survey that was actually provided at the beginning of negotiations, and it was a wider range. And so it was actually it was sort of brought up a baseline to make it basically the average around with the compensation survey, salary survey, or one of the classifications. And then we added on incentives for the other employees to make up and get up to a little above average in terms of total compensation they could achieve.
Okay, thanks. And then one last question, because I can't remember. You mentioned SD2 before. I can't remember. Is there a cost allocation on that where they SD2 reimburse? I just couldn't remember just high level how that worked, or
No, absolutely.
did it background? I
Absolutely.
just couldn't remember.
Yes, the time that as you know, our maintenance staff covers both public works and also SD2 responsibilities. And so the hours that are essentially spent on SD2 projects and SD2 work are essentially billed. Well, actually, the town essentially bills SD2 for it and gets funding. The money comes back to the town essentially for those hours that are worked.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks. And I'm sorry. Just one last question. Shoot, I lost my train of thought. Go ahead with somebody else.
Okay, well, Adam, thank you for answering so many of my questions earlier today. I appreciate it. I just have one that kind of popped up in hearing you speak about it again. If an employee exempts themselves from health coverage and gets back the money, are they then exempted also from like the wellness program and things like that? Or do they still get to partake in those benefits? Okay, good. Okay. And the only other question I would ask you is there anything else we should be doing to attract and retain really excellent employees? Is there anything that
Town hall was a big help.
town hall, I'm sure, fancy office?
There you go.
Okay,
Yeah, no, no,
that's enough for this year.
No, absolutely. And I think that's what's good about this conversation. I mean, I view it as a conversation, a discussion amongst our staff, and like our staff wants to bring in good quality people as well. And so it's a common goal and I think we landed in a spot where we feel like we're in a good place on that regard.
One benefit that I know doesn't cost us much is to give them discounts from Parks and Recreation and after school care and things like that. That's not included in here, but are there childcare kinds of benefits and that just aren't included in this particular document?
No, everything is in here.
Oh, they're in there? I didn't see it.
I'm sorry. I think it may be part of the Park and Rec fee schedule for somewhere where I think employees get a 25% discount on programming, if I can remember. And I think that includes Central Marin Police and Fire also. Somebody think includes.
Adam, you don't need to look at that. It's no problem. I know.
I'm sorry, I remember what I was going to ask.
Okay.
Right now, Adam, we have 42 employees. Do we have any open positions? And then what's it ramped up to? And is that pretty much it?
Well, so I will say we have 42. That doesn't include me. So I'm 43. And then we also have 2 part-time employees that are not included, that are working about 30 hours. So they're sort of almost full-time employees, and they're in the Park and Recreation Department. We have 4 vacancies right now. Hoping to fill a couple of those fairly soon. A few of those are in the building department. And so, but that number that I'm giving you includes those vacancies.
The 42?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Great. No questions? No questions. All my questions have been asked. So we'll go ahead and open this item up for public comment. Any members of the public who would like to comment in person, please come up to our podium. If you're on Zoom and you'd like to comment, please go ahead and raise your hand and we'll bring you on. Not seeing anybody here in person who would like to comment. Do we have any hands up on Zoom, Lorena?
We do not have hands raised from members of the public. It looks like our Human Resources Manager did join, so I think if you have any questions, she'll pop on and respond.
Great, thank you. Well, seeing no public comment, we'll close public comment on this item and bring it back to council for discussion, and we'll start down here this time.
Good job, Adam.
Ditto. I just want to say, as I was reading through it this afternoon, I was thinking, wow, this would be a really good place to work. I liked the things that you were bringing forth. And I realized that's the whole idea. We need to be that place where people want to work. So thank you for the creativity and, some of the things like wellness and being open there. And
You sparked something, if I may. I'd just like to chime in. Yeah, one thing I didn't mention, but I think I certainly am proud to bring to the organization is the bilingual pay program for certain employees. I think that's really important to recognize, that skill that is very valuable to our community, and that has often been voluntarily done. But I also think it's important to recognize as well.
Good work.
And just me, I want to thank Adam also for all the work on this, but I also want to thank the employees that were on the other side of the table with you, because again, it takes two to tangle and two to go through these negotiations. So I appreciate both sides. Thanks.
And not to be horribly repetitive, but I will echo the thanks as well, both to you, Adam and Janet, who negotiated on behalf of the town, and also to all the employees who negotiated in good faith and agreed to stay part of the team. It does affirm that team, which is really nice. And I think, in a way, it kind of reminds me of like renewing your vows almost. So it's like, it's fun, just to see that everybody's like, yeah, we're still on the same team. This is working. So that's exciting. And I just wanted to say, Adam, great job on some of those smaller reforms around things like dental, double health coverage, and transit expenses. Those are wins for the employees and wins for the taxpayers. So great job kind of finding those win-win situations. Thank you. And with that, I think we're looking for a motion to introduce 3 resolutions.
Yeah, the matter of clarification, does each one need to be brought up separately, or can we do all 3 in one go?
I think if you wanted to direct staff on all 3, well,
Okay.
I'll let Amy. Amy's looking like she wants to chime in.
No, I mean, technically, you only need to adopt a resolution at one meeting. It's a policy that the board adopted to do matters involving compensation, 2 hearings to give more transparency to the public. So, if you want, you could move to introduce, or you can just, you've made your comments and provided direction, then you can just adopt the resolutions at the next meeting.
Great. Well, it sounds like we have unanimous direction. So thank you very much.
Great. Thank you.
All right. So that concludes our business items tonight. We'll move on to item 7 on our agenda, which is council reports, and we'll start with the town manager.
Gotta find my paper here.
It's been a month.
I've written down a couple of things. I will start with some, and I think I've mentioned this to a couple of you, but I do think it's worthwhile mentioning it again, and something that it's very exciting. But I think I'd mentioned maybe a few months ago that the town had won the APA NorCal Section Award for our public outreach on our housing element. Martha Battaglia submitted this to the state, California American Planning Association chapter. And it turns out we won that award as well for excellence in public outreach. And so it's very exciting. I will say we won the award of excellence. The award of merit went to just the Los Angeles Planning Department. And so for their housing work as well. So I think that's pretty exciting to say a little, our small team sort of was recognized over a sort of a huge I did want to give an update. It came up tonight, the Intergenerational Center, just give a quick update on where we are with that. So we're working on our lease with the with our broker, but we're with the landlord as well, trying to finalize the programming, and some of the details around things like hours and just the capacity, the design as well. All going in the right direction. It's a little bit slow, but I think that's wise in this circumstance as well. Next steps would be as well to, at some point here, to come back to the town council once we have sort of the parameters in place regarding the terms. I think we probably go to closed session on that before coming to the council for any action or direction to move forward. But wanted to just let you know that that is proceeding and moving forward. And then I did have an update. The next town council meeting on August 20th, we will have our a colleague of ours at the Office of Emergency Management, our director, Stephen Torrance, will be giving a presentation as well to the council. So you'll be hearing from him and about the work and collaboration we're also doing with OEM, which is sort of a new regime up there. And it's sort of a nice way to hear directly from Stephen on that.
OEM, can you just translate?
Office
Sorry.
of Emergency Management.
Okay.
Out of their county,
Great, thank you very much. With that, we'll move on to council reports, and we'll start with Fred.
Thanks. 6:19, I attended age-friendly Corte Madera. Not much to say because Patty gave presentation tonight. 6:20, attended Marine Wildfire Prevention Agency board meeting, and then 7/4, 4th of July, which I'll let other people chime in with that. And one thing, Adam, when we get these awards, you may want to figure out where the permit area is to post them there, put them on the wall somewhere, because it's an achievement that we should be showing the town and residents. Thanks.
Thank you, Charles.
July 2nd, opened the town hall. Nothing else to report.
Excellent. Rosa.
Yes, you know what? I think I didn't go far enough back in my calendar because I was like, wait a minute, it was June. But anyway, I'll tell you about July. July 1st, I attended the Twin Cities Disaster Preparedness Committee, and Steve Torrance, from the director of Marin Office of Emergency Management, spoke. So you're in for a treat. You're going to feel so safe after you hear from him. And also I attended on the same day, Marin Healthy Youth. And they were highlighting their new Instagram presence that's very interactive, and it's very, very impressive. So, yeah.
Great. Thank you, Pat.
Okay, just a couple things. I'll start on the 4th of July. We had such a great time, but I have to say Larkspur gets the much better end of the parade. Everybody's fresh, the bubble machines are working, everybody's excited. By the time we got to Corte Madera, though, there were people who weren't so happy because there were huge delays in the parade, and it was because of the cheerleaders or whatever. But I do think I heard from enough people that I think there should be more, just a little bit more planning. I found out that all the other parades that are done in the county are put on by these big committees. They have like 10 people working on a parade. And in our town, it's one person. It's Julie Kritzberger. She does it all herself. And I think she needs some help. And I think we can do it in a way that it'll work for her. The other thing is that we finally heard back from Senator Mike McGuire, our majority leader in the Senate, that he would like to come and visit and give us the community chat that we've been asking for. So he's coming on Wednesday morning, July 31st at 10 a.m. I guess that was the first time he could see us in the 2 years that I've been asking him to come. But we don't know where yet. So we're thinking and hoping town hall, but a backup would be either Cafe Verde or the community center. So still trying to figure out the details because we just heard from him this afternoon. But you're definitely all invited to attend. I know our mayor will be away in New York, but hopefully the rest of us can be there to talk to him about state issues that we are concerned about. And the community too.
Fantastic. Thank you. I'll keep it to just the highlights. On June 20th, I attended the ribbon cutting for the new Smart Train shuttle, which goes from the train station in Larkspur to the ferry building, and on weekends serves the Corte Madera Shopping Center. So that's really good for local businesses. Super exciting that we'll get more Sonoma customers at our businesses here. On June 27th, we had a Central Marin Sanitation Agency meeting of our ad hoc committee that's starting to look at the proposed sort of soft consolidation between CMSA and the San Rafael Sanitary District. So, lots of discussion still to be had, but I'll keep you guys apprised as any proposed sort of terms take shape. Also on June 27th, had a Transportation Authority of Marin meeting. Got some very hopeful updates on the Richmond-San Rafael Bridge, most of which I've forgotten now, but one of the highlights, two of the highlights, one is that that third travel lane on the eastbound, the lower deck that is open during rush hour, that was a pilot program and they're going to make it permanent now. So that's fantastic. Surprise, surprise, it reduced traffic. So that's great. And then the other thing is they're going to look at a pilot program on the upper deck, the westbound deck, to basically have that bike lane that's there. They're going to look at turning that into a breakdown lane. I can't remember if it's during rush hour or during weekdays, but basically they're kind of taking a leaf, from what they did on the lower deck. I think that's exciting. I think that's something that folks have been asking about. So I thought that was a hopeful picture there for Marin residents. July 2nd, we had our fantastic town hall opening. I was there. July 4th, we had our parade. It was really fun to be in the parade with all of you guys. July 9th, had a CMSA, Central Marin Sanitation Agency regular board meeting. July 10th, I had a meeting with Transportation Authority of Marin staff about our overpass project here. Cheryl Longinati, who is on our bicycle pedestrian advisory committee, brought it to my attention that Caltrans is currently in the process of redoing their annual bike plan. And as part of that, they assess sort of like every project in every jurisdiction that they might touch. Our overpass project is in there, and they had scored it a 0 for safety and a 0 for equity. And as Cheryl rightly pointed out, it is in fact a super important project from both a safety and an equity perspective. So I had a really good meeting with TAM staff and was able to just kind of impress upon them the fact that this is the most important piece of transportation infrastructure in Corte Madera, that it's incredibly unsafe in its current configuration, and that it is the main access to public transit for all of our most vulnerable communities. So I was grateful that TAM staff were receptive to those comments, and they said that they would pass them along to Caltrans and that they were confident that Caltrans would be receptive as well. And that is all I've got to share. Yeah.
If I may, I have one other question for you, because it was in the IJ about Nordstrom's with the 1 million refund property tax. Is there a fiscal effect to Corte Madera, or do you know yet?
We're still, Daria, like today, actually was getting some information from the county on its impacts, but it looks like it was actually already included in the last property tax fund, or I don't know what they call it. It's actually their last statement to us, and so it didn't seem to have much impact on our property tax, since our property tax actually was more than we were expecting in the last month.
Okay, thanks.
Great. All right. Are there any comments on the draft agenda for the next meeting? And if not, we're going to adjourn the town council meeting.